All right, we are on air and ready to go.
Okay, so does anybody want to give a prayer, or do they not care? It's up to you.
Do you want to do it this week, Vanessa?
Sure.
All right.
Okay. Our Father in heaven, we thank thee for this day, and we thank thee for all the many blessings that thou hast given us. We're thankful for this opportunity to be able to meet and to be able to learn from one of your great educational institutions. We ask you to please have thy spirit be with us, that we'll be able to make clear and articulate thoughts in regarding this case. And I say this in the name of Jesus Christ, amen.
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 Okay, anybody want to share a spiritual thought?
Sure.
Okay.
Can pull one of these up.
And since you're in the middle of a religion class, you've got Doctrine and Covenants open, and you can go for it.
Loaded, ready to go.
Very true. All right, so our thought for today comes from D&C section 88, and we'll do 88 verse 3. It says, "Wherefore I now send upon you another comforter, even upon you, my friends, that it may abide in your hearts, even the Holy Spirit of promise, which other comforter is the same that I promised unto my disciples, as is recorded in the testimony of John." And I just really like this because it shows the consistency and just how the gospel is the same. That our Heavenly Father, he put the Holy Ghost on the earth at one point and gave it to his disciples, and then he's giving it to us as well, to always be in our hearts and to have that same comfort that he offered to his apostles and disciples at that time in the gospel as well. Amen. Any questions?
We're good.
All right.
Thumbs up.
All right. Okay, so we're on step number 3. It says, opening. Many of our discussions center on understanding success or making crucial decisions. Today we are trying to account for failure. To begin your group discussion, quickly reconstruct the key elements of the Cake Financial business model. So the first one was the customer value proposition. Basically, he wanted to offer people, or what I understood from it, is he wanted to offer people a way to manage their finances and then share their knowledge with others so that other people can become better investors as well through his Cake Financials.
Yeah. And his plan, so a big part of his market plan was, like you said, it was like a unifying platform, right, for stock decisions, all that stuff. It was a way for everyone to have everything in one. And also, he focused a lot on like the social media type thing, like sharing it with people. Into it. Anyone?
Wait, are we talking about the in Horwitz case? That one?
That one's this weekend. That's the next one.
I read the wrong case.
Oh no!
What are you talking about? This makes no sense.
Well, you can lead the discussion on Saturday.
Yep, I guess so.
Now step ahead.
Yeah.
For that one.
That's okay. Don't worry about it. You can kind of throw in your opinion based upon what you think from hearing. I've done that before. I just read the wrong case. Oh well, we'll just keep going. So.
Okay. So where were we?
You were talking about how he was using social media as kind of like a guide.
Right. Yeah. So I guess that was his plan. Is that he saw this big opportunity to lead this, to have this platform where everyone's stock activity, investment, and stuff was unified, and he kind of saw the writing on the wall of how social media was coming into the picture, and he wanted to implement that into his platform. I think overall his plan was very ambitious. Obviously, this case isn't about him succeeding, though. It's about him failing. Are there any other like key elements that anyone wants to add that we might have missed?
I don't
No?
think so.
Okay.
Not that I can think of. My brain's kind of fried, so I'm trying.
No worries. Okay, so his go-to-market plan. To me, it seemed like he just kind of tested it. He did a couple of focus groups and then just kind of launched it. Did anybody
Yeah.
get more out of it than that?
No, and I think, I mean, this might not be the point to talk about it on, but I think one of his biggest failings was like his market research and stuff. I don't think he did enough. So I'm sure we'll have some time to elaborate on that. But yeah, I think it's kind of like what you said. You just kind of had the idea, then did some research and just kind of threw it out into the wild.
Yeah, no, I agree with you completely. There was like not a lot, if any. I mean, I'm sure he did a little bit of research and probably what seemed like a lot to him, but yeah, not a lot.
Well, it also seemed like he kind of knew exactly what he wanted, so he didn't feel like he needed to do research. I guess
Sure.
it's a little bit of arrogance that comes along with having a vision and wanting to stick to it.
Yeah, you definitely have to find out if it's viable, even if it feels really good.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay, so his technology and operations strategy. Anybody else want to go first on this one?
This one isn't like
Hold
in.
on.
All these case studies are always set up differently, so I forget how to look for things.
Well, okay, so if we're talking, sorry, I'm jumping around here. If we're talking technology and operations strategy, I mean, it was mainly like a website, right? It was, or it was like a service. It was like a digital service, and I mean, he was planning to run it because I think part of this whole thing is that, again, he had that vision to kind of move things into the modern age. This was the time where Facebook was starting up, you know, where MySpace had a pretty good following. You know, it's a time where everyone could see how the new digital age was influencing big businesses and ideas. So I think it was kind of a unique approach. I think, you know, the idea of having this digital service was very ambitious and could have caught on, but, you know, it just wasn't totally there.
Yeah, I feel like, sorry, go ahead.
No, I was done.
Oh, okay. I feel like he just, I don't know. I feel like he just kind of dropped out too quickly. I honestly feel like this could have been a successful thing because in 2005, and when this all kind of started going, was just when everything started to boom in technology. And I think if he would have stayed with it at this point in time, currently, that would probably be a tool that was used by a lot more people. But he gave up after, I think it was only 3 years of actually running the company. He just kind of gave up on it and sold it. But that's kind of, I probably jumped ahead too. But anyway, so yeah, as far as his operation strategy goes, I never really read anything about a strategy he had. Just kind of what you said. He just kind of like, we're going to do this. He got the money, the funding, and he launched it. And it's, I don't know. I didn't see a lot of strategy in there.
I didn't really see a lot of strategy either, except he had an idea and then he kind of like was in that TechCrunch 40 type thing that he didn't end up winning because Mint.com won it. But I think at this point in time when he came up with this idea, it was, as I think somebody else said, I can't remember who, that it was kind of the boom of technology, of where people were getting more involved in things because there was online banking, there was you know, social media that was kind of starting. It was still in the infant stages, but it was still there, and people were getting hooked onto this whole thing of where, you mean like I can actually log into a website and see my investments and see what's going on and seeing how to manage my money and doing that kind of thing. And so I think he just kind of didn't really step up to the plate. He was kind of wanting to stay back and see how other things did it, even though he felt like he had a good product. I think he could have delivered more.
Well, didn't a lot of his plan, if we're talking strategy, didn't a lot of his plan kind of depend on like collaboration too with other big companies and stuff to be able to use that data? Like,
that's the feeling that I got, is that he wanted to connect with the brokerage firms, which I think a lot of the brokerage firms, I mean, like Charles Schwab, all of those types of things, or, you know, companies are similar to that, they were developing their own. So, you know, then it kind of turned into a third party of coming in. But then there were these, but then every company had its own guidelines that they had to abide by. So he really, to be able to go with all the brokerage firms, he had to kind of customize each program to be able to go with them. And I think that was probably a little bit frustrating to him.
Right. For sure. Okay, well, should we keep going?
Yeah. To financials.
So the cash flow formula.
Yes.
Okay, let me just.
I haven't done that yet, so I can't screen share mine.
Okay, well, so he was banking on like a subscription service. Right, like the $99 per year premium service that offer investment advice and trading options.
Oh, for his income, his revenue?
Yeah, that's what we're talking about.
Yeah, that's it. He had his 3 key points of where he was going to get revenue from, and it was advertising, his premium services, and then on the financials, it has in Exhibit 3, it has his bounty payments and fund fees, all as revenue. I honestly think he kind of overshot his revenue or his estimates of what he thought he could make, because I think like a first-year company from February to December of 2007, so that's almost a full year of a brand new company. Like, I think you'd be lucky to break even or be profitable at all, because it's just your first year of running.
Especially if you had lots of capital that was built up by outside investors, then you're running into an issue of that you still carry all that debt, even though you feel like you're making money.
Yeah, it's really hard for most companies, even good ones, to break even in the first year.
Yeah,
for sure.
Unless you're just something totally weird and
it
goes viral for some reason.
Okay, well, maybe we should move on to the next part, because I feel like that's kind of the crux of this one, is analyzing the failures and stuff like that.
Okay, so part 4 was after your group has recreated the business model, vote was Cake doomed from the beginning, or was this a promising business model? Beginning with those who say it was promising business model, tell the group why you like it, provide a convincing argument in favor of the business. What evidence from the case can you use to support this position? And then do the opposite for the people who disagree.
Okay. I don't think Cake was doomed from the start. I think the concept was a viable concept that could have caught on. Again, he was right in the hot spot, like the prime time for building these services that would catch on through the viral age, the social media age, stuff like that. Because you have a lot of companies that were starting around back then that are huge now. I mean, you have Facebook, you have all these other ones. I feel like the fundamental ideas behind his business, like this aggregation platform, I think it could have worked. But it's like I said before, I don't think he did enough research, and I think he had too many conflicting ideas on what he wanted his vision to be. that he didn't find a cohesive one and focus on it. So it ended up kind of being this weird mishmash of a lot of different ideas, and he was constantly like changing it and trying to, you know, switch things up. When I think if he would have just done more research and settled on a really solid basic idea, I think it could have worked.
I agree with Zach. I think he could have been successful with this. I think he wanted success too quickly as well. He was expecting more than he could get at one point, to add onto everything that Zach said without restating it.
Yeah, and I agree. I think it was kind of a little bit of the cart before the horse type situation. I think the idea was good. Just the execution was kind of poor because it was not really planned out. And he didn't seem to kind of follow what would be a natural evolution of taking people's advice or suggestions from others.
Yeah, and I think, again, like I think the fundamental concepts were good. I just think he tried to do like a little too much, and he tried to, like, I almost felt like he felt like his thing would be the next revolutionary big idea. And so he tried to put everything into it. And like me, I mean, when I think of stock and investing and stuff like that, I'm not thinking of social media, you know, like
Yeah.
I'm not thinking about jumping on Facebook and sharing all my stock activity and stuff. So I think that's one example where he kind of was overambitious. Like, I think the idea of having an aggregation platform with all the other features he had in mind is good.
I feel like he didn't test a lot of it. Like, he didn't identify who his target market was from the beginning. It wasn't until later that he stated that I think it was like 40 to 50-year-old men who really didn't care about sharing their financial ideas. And he's like, but we'd already put so much money into the social media part of it. We didn't want to stop it. And it's kind of like, well, at that point, you should just mark it as a sunk cost and move on. Because if your target market doesn't want it, you're just going to keep wasting more money on something that's not even being used.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he had the sunk cost fallacy going on. It's like, spend all this money, but, you know, it's going to go to waste now if we don't. In reality, sunk costs are sunk costs, and it's not going to do any good to.
Well, and every company has them. I mean, there's plenty of elements of every company that people spend money in researching, developing, and then have to just abandon it because it's not going to work.
Yeah, well, even when he talked about his focus groups, one of his quotes, he even said, he's like, none of the information we really got from this focus group was useful to us. And I'm kind of like, well, then you probably weren't testing the right things with your focus group. That's when you should have been gathering data on, well, is your focus group the right age group? And then are they going to use your social media functions, or do they just want to use you to get the information and track their investments?
Well, go ahead.
Go ahead. No,
I was going to say, in focus groups and surveys and stuff, I mean, you can skew the results to kind of however you want, but it's really important to ask the right questions to be able to get, you know, appropriate feedback based upon what's useful to you.
Yeah, and I think that's the problem, is that he had this vision, and didn't he kind of just think it would appeal to everyone? I feel like that's one of his problems. It's just like, it's going to be the next big thing. Everyone needs this, so who wouldn't use it? So it's like you said, he didn't take enough time deciding on a focus group, because even if your product is universally appealing, you still have a focus group.
Yeah.
Like, there's always a target audience.
Well, and I think that was a little bit of his like excitement, but also a little bit of his arrogance that came along with the plan. And it was just like, well, this is obviously just going to succeed because it's that brilliant, not necessarily that, oh, well, maybe I should, you know, tailor it a little bit different, or actually make it a product that somebody wants.
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Should we add anything to this, or should we move on? What do you guys think?
I think we're good. Anybody else want to comment?
I think we're good. Madeline, do you have anything you want to add just from what you've heard?
Oh, I think she cut out.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me now?
Yeah.
They cut out again.
I don't know. I think there's something wrong with my internet.
Yeah, it sounds kind of choppy.
Yeah, I don't.
Well, maybe next week it will be better, or this weekend, Saturday, next time we talk.
Hopefully.
Okay.
Sucks. I know the feeling of the internet, for sure.
We can go on to the next thing. So next, discuss Stephen's approach to the opportunity. Try to understand what, if any, Stephen could have done differently that may have produced a better outcome. On page 3, Stephen says, in retrospect, I am not sure that these early focus groups were very helpful. They validated our high-level concept, but did not seek feedback on specific product. I've learned that focus groups for technical products can be unreliable because people can't always say what they want until they actually see it or play around with it. We would have learned more by building a lightweight product, watching how investors used it. We also didn't get much sense of users segmentation from our early focus groups. Later, we learned that they are important but subtle differences between active users who track their portfolios daily and mainstream investors who pay less attention. So I feel like this kind of comes back to the thing of where, yeah, if you're testing a product, it's nice to have something that's like tangible that somebody can touch or, play with to be able to do that. But if you're also very clear in your focus on how to describe something and be able to give a great description, then you may not have to have the product for somebody to play around with, especially if you're asking like the right people, the people that are in the industry, and people that actively say that they're, they like to watch their portfolios daily. They like to know what's going on with it. I mean, it's kind of pointless to ask somebody like me what would be investment things, because I don't think I've looked at my 401k since I started at my job 7 years ago. So I just don't, like that wouldn't make any difference to me.
Well, I think there's multiple levels to it, because like, to me, it sounds crazy to go to a bunch of focus groups with a product you don't have. I think it's good to go to a lot of people with a concept and say, hey, does this concept sound good to you?
Mm-hmm.
I think you should do that with concepts, because you need to learn if people will even like the idea in the first place before you spend a much amount on development. But like your focus group, that should be a focus group.
Yeah.
In the very early stages, but you need to have more, and you need to show them something. And like, I can think of a lot of tech things where I would maybe not even warm up to them that much if I was only heard them explained, like around, I mean, like when Facebook didn't exist, explaining a social network to somebody, it could sound really cool, but it'd also be like, was it going to be good? I kind of want to see it. Or even simple stuff like Pandora. I mean, if somebody said, hey, I have this service which is going to play music that you like according to the songs that you play, it would say, great, that sounds cool, go ahead and make it, but I'm not going to necessarily support it unless I know it works.
Yeah.
Like if you gave me Pandora and it just gave me trash suggestions the whole time, then they should do that kind of research and figure out if their stuff works and if it's good, if it's viable.
Yeah, last time we met, it reminded me of the Dropbox case too, because it says too, they actually created a way for people to like try their product. He had a select amount of people that he allowed to use Dropbox just to test it and to work out the kinks to see if this was something to succeed. They actually took the time to thoroughly test their product to make sure it was going to work. And I don't feel like these guys did that at all. I don't feel like they tested it.
Well, and I think one of the caveats to this thing, though, and I remember reading it on one of the pages, is that some of the contracting, they weren't, with some of the brokerage firms, they weren't allowed they were not allowed to beta test. So that may have been something that threw him off, of that he just is like, well, if I can't do it to be able to get away with it, then I might as well not do it at all.
Well, and it is true that they did have a somewhat difficult product to test because a lot of their functionality depended on massive amounts of aggregated data from firms and stuff. So that does put you in a tricky position. But I think even then, like, I think it's good to be, like, I think that's one reason why it's important to focus on simplicity rather than complexity, because he has an idea that depends on a lot of things to work. And just getting that going is going to be hard with how many influences, you know, with how many things he has to get working together. Mm-hmm. So doing that and adding a bunch of other features before the core main features even really proved or tested, I think was one of their big downfalls, because they could have taken the resources, the money, the time spent, the manpower to just perfect a very basic core functionality of their service. And I think they should have, you know, really done a lot of research on that. And then once it gets going, it's kind of like Dropbox. It's like if Dropbox from the onset was like, hey, let's do business, let's do this, let's do that, let's get into every smartphone in the country. You know, if they said all that stuff right when they launched, it would have been too much.
Yeah.
You know. Yeah, so simplicity. Good research, I think, is important.
I agree.
I agree.
I agree.
All right.
Okay, so on page 10, Stephen says, there is no way you could have learned this up front through interviews or focus groups. There were a lot of precedents pointing to a strong social component, including investment clubs and activities on sites like Raging Bull. I don't think the sole focus should have been social media. Yeah, you could have advertised on social media, but I think that he was expecting a lot more out of social media, of like people were going to, you know, have these investment clubs and everybody was going to like say, oh, this is the greatest product. Which, you know, there's things that I have found that I use daily that have never appeared on social media. And I learned about them by accident through somebody else in one of the groups I belong to, stating, you know, that and it's a budgeting software. It's that they were trying to figure out how to budget software of where they could keep it up to date, and that their husband and them could use, you know, as a couple, they could use it and not end up going over, you know, their budget. And that was the way that I found out about it. Like, even when you Google search budget software, this thing does not pop up on the first page of Google. But I love it. It's great. It's a great product. But now that I'm into it, I know that they have a Facebook page, they have an Instagram page, they have all the social media, but they do not rely on the social media to bring customers in. They rely on people having their lives fundamentally changed by this budgeting software and telling their friends about it, even though it was through social media.
Yeah, that's fair. I agree with you. I agree in the sense that social media shouldn't have been a focus in the very beginning. And I do think his thing had a really good opportunity for viral growth. Like, you know, you're using it and you tell a friend, that's cool. But if we're talking about social media as a marketable strategy, I think one of the problems I had with it, and you know, I didn't see them launch in person, so maybe it'd be different if I did, but I think he has an interesting idea with like emulating investment clubs and like the social aspect of it. Like, he has this interesting idea of bringing these concepts into a streamlined universal app website type thing. I think there's problems there. I think you could do something with that. One of the feelings I got from the case study is that perhaps he was marketing it too hard as like social media. Mm-hmm. Because when I think of that, I think of sharing things with my buddies, you know, like, hey, I just made this investment, guys, look at me. When, you know, that may not have necessarily been his goal. It's probably, like he said, more like investment clubs where people can get together, talk about opportunities, speculate together. But I think he should have pushed that angle harder if he was going to do it. He shouldn't have called it like social media, but rather like the world's biggest investment club, or like some, you know, silly tagline that advertises it as a revolution in investment clubs meeting, whatever. You guys know what I mean?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying with like, it shouldn't have been, these like little groups. He should have turned it into more of like, it turned it into a community type thing of where it was like, this is the place to go and to use this software and to be a part of this if you are wanting to be more involved in investing.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
Okay.
Because Facebook kind of took the approach of like, here's the, MySpace was around before, which MySpace sort of, I felt like turned into kind of like a dating website and like, a hookup website than it did. Where Facebook, I feel like, has a different agenda where it's like, hey, post all your stuff, post your pictures, have your friends and family follow you, where MySpace didn't have the same feeling. And where like with this type of investment club, you could turn it more into like a social aspect of where you have people of like-minded ideas and also like-minded wants in life to be able to merge together and learn stuff from each other.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I do think he could have tested his idea, though. I mean, he says there was no way you could have learned this up front, but I still think he could have tested even the social component of it. He could have still created a little aspect of that and just ran it through a trial group to see if they used it at all before just spending a lot of money and launching it on his final.
Well, and even some of these investment clubs, he could have asked them, and if there's people in there that were, active daily portfolio watchers, they probably could have gave him a lot of good ideas on how they would like to see it done and what it would look like and how it should work.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I feel like ultimately it should have just been one or the other. It should have been like an aggregation investment platform or a social investment club online platform, one or the other. And then as it grows, as it expands, you can add the other component in.
Mm-hmm.
But trying to launch both of those at once is a little too ambitious, I think. I think maybe somebody could have pulled it off with more startup experience, like one of these crazy entrepreneur moguls, but I think for first timer, this guy just wasn't equipped with the experience or the, just whatever to be that ambitious.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, should we move on?
Yep. Okay, as a group, can you come up with a list of ways Steven's approach is different from Rent the Runway, Dropbox, and Mint? How do you think of us? How do you know which assumption to test first? Was building the data layer first the right approach? What would you have done first? I think we've discussed a lot of this already.
Yeah, we already compared it to Dropbox.
Yeah.
And Rent the Runway. You guys have any thoughts about that? How it's different? It's a very different concept.
It's a whole different thing, but Tiffany and I covered this case together, and we both kind of came, interrupt me if I'm wrong, Tiffany, that Rent the Runway just kind of threw stuff at the wall and just decided we're just going to go with this and we're not going to like really deviate anything. They just had an agenda and they went with it, and they really did it quickly. That, within it was like 13 months they were launched and going and kind of in over their head in a lot of ways. And I kind of felt like this is kind of the same deal, but I mean, Rent the Runway turned into an excess just because I think it was a different product. It was going to a different market. It was going to a different age bracket. People wanted different things out of it.
Yeah, sorry. They were only measuring 1 year's worth of data, too. They'd only been going that 1 year in that case because they were going to ask for funding at the start of that year.
Yeah.
Well, okay, and that's a good point that they both kind of launched pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm.
They both just kind of jumped in their idea. But I think one big differentiator between Rent the Runway is, unlike Cake, they had a really good understanding of their target audience.
That's true.
And I think that's one of the big things that did in Cake, because the Rent the Runway girls, they knew what their target audience, like they were their target audience, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Like we're young women who can't afford dresses all the time, and we know how it feels. We want that. I feel like they were very perceptive. If they weren't as perceptive as they were, I think they definitely could have failed.
Yeah. Well,
And that might be
the same thing with Dropbox too. You know, I mean, they came in knowing exactly kind of who their target audience was, and it was a very big target audience. It was, you know, college students, you know, business people that needed to have access to documents or their hard drive, you know, wherever they were on the go. So they kind of had their target audience also.
Well, that's actually, sorry.
Oh, I mean, they kind of had it in, they had found their niche. They had found their group of people that they needed to go after and tailor their thing to.
Yeah, and I feel like that's a good point, because Dropbox was like, I feel like Dropbox could have fit, because Dropbox had a lot of sort of competitors, but they were all in the business sector. And like none of us, nobody like us knew about any of those things. They seemed kind of unwieldy and inefficient. So yeah, Dropbox did a really good job in being like, hey, what about everyone else? Like, what about the real world, just regular people?
Yeah.
And if they tried to focus again on everyone, like you can't get big business and build a product that's perfect for the small individual. It's one or the other. This one, I feel like Cake, again, it tried to do both.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I don't really know anything about Mint other than what was discussed in this case, which I didn't feel like it was a whole lot unless I missed a whole entire page.
To me, it just seems like they said they took a little simpler route. They weren't as complex as Cake was, and I think that's why they were successful. I mean, Zach brought that up earlier. Cake was just kind of all over the place, where Mint was just kind of like, hey, you can run your finances here.
Yeah, I think Mint's more of like a personal finance budgeting software of where you can link all your bank accounts and credit cards and like and get a big picture of where you are as far as financial thing. But I think that Cake was taking it even further into investments. So that adds a whole nother layer to it. And I mean, if I had to look at it, I'm not into big investing, so I wouldn't probably pay an extra money to have that as a feature on something that I use, because it's not important to me.
Right. I agree. You think we should move on to the next point?
Sure.
Anything else?
Sure.
I think we covered all the questions. Okay, so as a group, identify the main reasons for Cake's failure. Was the failure just beyond Steven's control? I don't think so. I don't think it was beyond Steven's control. I think that he was pretty calculated in his idea, but he was kind of rigid and wasn't willing to adjust. Unless I'm totally reading it wrong.
No, I basically agree. I think, because again, like I said, I think he had a good concept. I think it could have been successful, and it almost was. I mean, we've already talked about here how it might have even taken off if you waited with it a few more years, if you went with it. Who's to say? And it was bought out. I mean, clearly another company saw potential in their assets. So there's also that to consider. But yeah, I think we kind of addressed most of the reasons already why it failed.
Well, and I think when a company's bought out, I think there's kind of a few ways that it can go. It's either that the company wants to take the research and development that's already done and implement it into their system, so they want to buy it that way, or they buy it because they want to shut it down and be done with it. They don't want it on the market. They don't want the competition. They don't want any potential of them, this company or, this thing interfering with their trajectory of where they're going.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't really know when they got bought out, which direction that kind of went in.
That's true. It doesn't say specifically. Let's see.
I don't know. I would think they would still be using it, or at least the idea of it, because it said somewhere, I can't remember what page or where, but the other firms would talk about them and how they kind of their process. I think that was this case. Actually, it could have been a different case. But I think it was this case where they talked about that and how they had that potential.
Yeah. Well, we talked about this in the spin brush study. I mean, the spin brush case. Wow, I'm doing really great on my articulation. Of where, you know, Dr. Johns had a great product, but then you had to think, okay, there's these other large companies that are competitors, and if they don't want that type of thing on the market, they're going to buy it and like just make it disappear, or they're going to take it and run with it because they figure they can make more money at it.
Yeah.
So that was, you know, the options of, you know, sell the company, keep it going, or license it, and that kind of thing. And this kind of same thing could have applied to this. He could have licensed it.
Yeah, if I had to speculate, I would guess that they probably saw some kind of value in what he was creating.
Yeah.
And probably wanted to use it in some way. Because correct me if I'm wrong, but didn't it say that he had some investors that were still gung ho for him? Like there were some investors that were like, "No, dude, just like keep going. We got your back."
Yeah.
I think so.
Yeah, I mean it was picking up steam in certain areas, and you had some investors that still wanted to go with it, and you had somebody who wanted to buy it. I think all those are good indicators that it wasn't a fairly positive direction, but I also think in order to make it work, it would have been a tremendous amount of effort and manpower and a lot of rebuilding certain concepts. And I think at this point, maybe he was just over it. Like the buyout just seemed more appealing.
Yeah, he was just kind of done.
So I think we may have covered this question also too. Was there a low-cost experiment Stephen could have done to test the assumptions behind the main reason for the failure? I think just having a simple prototype program for somebody to play around with probably could have done some good testing to be able to make it so that it may have not have failed. He may have been able to tailor the program to be better.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would agree with that. Agree.
Okay, who wants to do the summary?
What is this?
We have to do like a summary. It can be anywhere between like a minute to 2 minutes. You just kind of summarize what we talked about, and
we just have to write it down on our quiz. What time?
Yeah, we just have to write it down when the summary starts. I can do it this time. So do you want to, Tiffany, you want to write it down?
I stopped it.
Oh, okay. Okay, so this summary is about Cake. We have had the discussion of why the company has failed. We just have decided that it was kind of too complex, that the simplicity, if there was a little more simplistic of a program, it could have been a lot more successful and probably been more like Mint, which happened to win the tech, whatever it was called, 40 something. I can't think of what the name of it is. And my brain just totally stopped. We also kind of discussed of where was this totally Stephen's fault, or were there things that were beyond out of his control? I think we all agreed that it was there were things that were out of his control, but also there were elements that he could have improved to keep it in his control. And I think that's it. It was a good product overall. It just needed some tweaking. Anybody else want to add anything?
That covers it.
That covers it? Okay.
Good. I'm going to stop it in a second.